Through the mists comes forth RPGaDay! In the year 2021, RPGaDay comes back for its 8th year. A time in August when every day we tackle another question or topic by answering in a way that uplifts the gaming community and answers questions people might have about this crazy hobby of ours that serves to build the community and bring it up, that many of us make blogs about, video blogs, art, or great works. In celebration of the community of gamers, I welcome you to RPGaDay 2021. Hello friends, I am Rob, the Dungeon Tutor, also sometimes Omnisci on my Lair of Omnisci channel. Today I am still making videos for the RPGaDay 2021, and today is the 29th day. Only a few more left, so hang on folks. Today's video is on the topic word system. And of course, since we're talking about role-playing games, that generally would invite me to have some discussion about my favorite system or a system that I absolutely hate. And you'd be right, quite honestly. Quick talk, first of all. When people talk about a gaming system, they're generally talking about the rules vehicle that drives the game. If I'm talking about the Star Wars, the role-playing game from West End Games, we're generally talking about their D6 system, a mechanic in which you roll a number of dice determined by your character themselves, and you roll them and total them up and try to compare against a target number the game master comes up with to see if you succeed or not. It's repeated over and over and over and over again. It is a system because it is a rules mechanic that is consistent, you can rely upon it, and you can use it to do anything in the game story. And quite honestly, I'm not going to do like a top 10. I think one of these days I should do a top 10 list of all the topics for RPGaDay. Those things seem to get more attention anyhow. But I'm going to really talk about the two favorites that I've got, and we'll just go with that. So, my least favorite system in any game that I've yet encountered, and even though I understand it and understand why it exists as it is, my least favorite mechanic is 316 Carnage Amongst the Stars. It has a relatively simple mechanic, quite honestly. You are soldiers in Earth's the 16th Battalion of the 3rd Army, sent out into space to kill everything that isn't a human. That's your job. Those things might be threats to humanity someday, so we're going to be preemptive and we're going to destroy those things first. A little bit of Starship Troopers in there. There's some bigger picture stories too, but quite honestly, that's the entire plot. It's kind of silly and doesn't need to make a lot of sense. As far as mechanics go, there are a number of threats. That can be a huge wave of little bugs. That can be a number of very large, scary monsters. That can be a small army of aliens coming to destroy you. Because you assume they're going to come to destroy you, of course. So what do? You roll a 10-sided die to find out if you win or not. By winning, if you succeed, you knock down some of the challenge, which means killing a set number of aliens, typically. And the way that your character does that is you have only 2 attributes. Through the whole game, you get 2 attributes, and there are no skills, just 2 attributes. Combat and non-combat. Both of them total up to 10. So if you really want to be good at killing things, you could have an 8 combat and a 2 non-combat, meaning that be it with a knife, be it with a gun, you are deadly. Very seldom are you going to fail to successfully combat something. But there are going to be times you just can't tie your own shoelaces. You are nearly inept at anything that doesn't involve shooting. Popular decision. Or you can swing that around the other way. You can have a character with an 8 non-combat abilities and a 2 combat abilities. You're milquetoast. You're not a good fighter at all. Either because you're hopelessly clumsy at it, or you just don't like guns and you only fire under duress, or whatever. That's fine, because your character isn't going to try to use that skill too often. You're going to look for other ways of doing things. So everything else that you might do, though, is based under your non-combat skill, whether that's treating somebody medically, which doesn't happen too often because either you're dead or you're dead. Doing computer stuff, doing athletic stuff, moving around. You're incredibly nimble. Your character is incredibly brainy. You might know all kinds of things. So it comes down to you roll a 10-sided die and try to get your number or less. And if you do, you succeed, and if you don't, you fail. And that's it. It's a pass-fail mechanic. It's incredibly simple, to the point I almost find it insulting. Now, there's a reason for it. This isn't a big, serious game that you're going to have long and lengthy campaigns on. No. You can, of course, do multiple games together, but your characters aren't particularly deep, and it's more of a competition to see who can rack up the biggest body count or get promoted, to see if you can achieve whatever goal it is you set for yourself. There are actually medals and consistent awards for the people who kill the most bugs, or whatever you're fighting. And likewise, if you get promoted, you also get concrete advantages too. Getting promoted isn't necessarily a matter of how many things you kill. So all in all, the game is too simplistic for me to really love as a role-playing game. It has a system that technically works. I mean, it does what it's supposed to do, but it lacks nuance. Relies a lot on the game master to make it interesting for any decent length of time. But it wasn't really made to be a game that was going to be endlessly, massive dynamics. It's a niche game. It's got its own little bug hunt fantasy going on. But, that is the nature of it. And I would never hold it out as the game's like, I'm really looking to get into role-playing games. What should I get? I wouldn't say 316 Carnage Amongst the Stars. That's a decent change of pace game, which is fine. Now, system I love. Let's contrast that. I love, and we'll just throw this out there, I love GURPS. I respect the Dungeons and Dragons D20 system that they've had basically since roughly 3rd edition, where it's just roll a die and add things to it to try to hit a number. Great. It's a lot better than going into a matrix or doing math off of that number, as Thaco did. I've generally liked how the D20 and beyond systems worked, but I've always loved GURPS, because GURPS, again, dazzlingly simple. Roll 3 6-sided dice, and you're trying to get equal to or lower than your skill that you're trying to shoot for, or maybe your attribute if you're defaulting. Getting to those numbers can take a little bit of a challenge. And also the mechanics of creating a character are point-based. They have relative values assigned to all these different things, and you get to choose, what you want to build your character up. I respect that. I understand it. It works to try to balance, because people have choices about where they find their characters as they're playing, and that's cool. To me, that's pretty awesome. Now, what I really do love about it, though, is that the game is modular. You can plug in things based on what you're feeling for the game that you want to run. If you want to run something cinematic like Dungeons and Dragons, where your characters aren't going to get killed very often, and you can gloss over some of the negative effects of combat, like shock, well, you can do that. You just plug in the rules that you're interested in. If you want to go with ultra high realism, even in a game genre that normally doesn't do ultra high realism, like say space fantasy, you can do that. They have numbers for everything. Everything is represented, and their system holds up on pretty much every end, from very low tech, small numbers, still being compelling, to really big numbers, which are either over and done with very quickly, or you can have competing escalating big numbers. Either way works. The breakdown really isn't until you start getting to crazy numbers. But I find that just by playing the default game and extrapolating on it and using all the different resources they have to plug in what you're interested in, I think makes for probably one of the most compelling true universal systems. I also do love, one of the things I've always loved about GURPS actually, is the fact that when they do have a supplemental book, you get a pretty good helping of what you're looking for. If you get the World War II book, for instance, it's full of facts, the historical flow of what happened, so that you can take a look, a snapshot of the area that you want to be in or the situation you want to impose, and springboard off of that to put as much detail as you want. But it has everything in front of you as opposed to making you go back and do more research, and it will link you to specific things if you are looking for more information to continue fleshing out your project. Also, they generally do a fairly comprehensive job of tackling their subjects. So, for instance, in martial arts, yes, they have the different martial arts, and one martial art may feel quite different from other martial arts, just what you would hope for in a game. But they also cover odd, almost martial arts, like professional wrestling is actually covered in there. Sport fighting, where you're fighting for points rather than trying to hurt your opponent. Rules for that are included in there. They probably didn't have to do that, but they did, and it's a better book as a result of it. Also detailing some of the different histories that are tied in behind some of the arts is a lot better than just giving a list of moves and things like that. If I took the GURPS martial arts book, and I took, for instance, the combat book for White Wolf games that they use for vampire and werewolf and all of that, well, it's night and day difference. The combat book has some things that I might reference through a game if I really wanted to use it, but the martial arts book is a book that compels me to read it through and enjoy the reading, enjoy some of the history, to enjoy the full scope of what I'm looking into. So, and a lot of the GURPS books are written like that. Even the ones that have less tactical value to your players, even the ones that have less hard mechanics, are still a good read to get you thinking about different things. For example, time travel. Time travel is a rocky, thorny subject, and I rarely go to time travel in any role-playing game. However, I find that the GURPS time travel book that was written is quite thoughtful and does invoke several different circumstances of time travel and the complications therein that can make a time travel game interesting and exciting. And we've seen different approaches to time travel before. We've seen the Star Trek absolute time travel where you can go back and you can change something bad that's happened. Which leads to the thought, why don't they do that all the time if bad things happen? But I digress. Especially since it's done with a spaceship, and they have lots of spaceships. But, more to the point, you also have seen time travel in kind of a less serious about the consequences form, but still with consequences, like Back to the Future. Back to the Future doesn't have it where Marty meets his mom, Elaine, and she's like, and then poof, he vanishes. He doesn't exist anymore because she just took her attention away from his father, and they don't ever fall in love. That's one of the scary thoughts of time travel, is that you could just invalidate yourself but the chance encounter and make yourself a paradox, which whoosh, gone. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can't argue with time. You can't argue with the rules of what is, being the game master. And they have rules in there for that strict of a level of time travel, including the butterfly effect, where you make an incredibly minute change in the past, but the ripples echo forward so that when you come back to a reality, it's unrecognizable, or it's changed in some drastic and fundamental way. So the idea of, for instance, going back in time to prehistoric time, and you walk and you step on a butterfly, you come back and everybody's a chimpanzee, or one thing or another happens, and you're in a completely different world, maybe no civilization. You don't know. That's the kind of thought that tickles the brains of people who are really into something like time travel. And that book does a pretty good job of covering some of those. It also gives you an entertaining campaign where you are basically a time travel tour guide, and you have to go through the trials and travails of stupid passengers and things that happened in history that you have to deal with. So if one of your tourists picks up a sword and goes charging off into a real battlefield, and you know that anybody that he kills could have lasting effects, what do you do? And that's a pretty compelling thing for a role-playing game to cover. So yeah, there's a lot of good things in their system, and their game is very attractive too. But the general gist of their system is a point-by-character build, and roll 3d6 to resolve just about anything. Dead simplicity, really. Even the possibilities of critical successes and failures are baked right into that. If you roll a 3, you're going to have a critical success. If you roll an 18, you're going to have a critical failure. And the range after that depends on how good you are. If you're really good, you can have a wider critical hit range than a 3. If you have a 16 or greater, you have a 3, 4, 5, or 6. If it's 10 points or greater on the success difference, you get criticals. That's pretty cool. Likewise, if you're absolutely abysmal, you have a decent chance of getting a critical failure. So it's a good, solid game system, and I've always enjoyed it. And it always kind of irks me a little bit when people slag it off that clearly haven't really played it and don't understand it. They're just repeating the memes of the day. Can you play it as one of the most complicated, crunchy games out there? Yeah, you could. But I dare say that I don't think very many people do. I think most people like a more light and liberal approach. To the point that, speaking out to that market, they actually produced a box set called Dungeon Fantasy, which essentially strips the GURPS system down to Dungeons and Dragons level of difficulty and level of cinematics approach. The classes are similar, things like that. So yeah, those are my thoughts on system. System is very important to a game. The fact that you could take any single adventure and you could endlessly adapt it to a variety of systems doesn't mean you're telling the same story over and over again, because the systems are going to have a very serious impact on how the game ends up playing out. But it can be a fun exercise, certainly, and you can sometimes get to different wrinkles that may not work so well in one game system that might work even better in another system that the game wasn't intended for. So, just some thoughts. Hopefully you enjoy that and got your brain thinking about systems that you like and systems that you've had problems with. So, as always, there are no right or wrong answers. What one person likes, another person will despise, and vice versa. Sometimes the most popular games are hated by many because they're so popular and they're not what they want to play, and that's cool. That's fine. But hopefully you have a favorite system. You've had a chance to play enough games where you have some thoughts on what makes a good system and what you do enjoy, and knowing your tastes can really help you steer you in the right directions. And if you have any questions beyond that, my Dungeon Tutor group on Facebook is certainly a good place to ask questions. I would answer and probably make a video to help you out with any questions you have regarding systems. And I've got a fair amount of experience in a variety of them, and always open to learning more. So feel free to chime in, and I'd be happy to discuss with you. Otherwise, if you have any other comments about anything I've said, you think I'm wrong, or you think I'm right, or you empathize, or you really think something about systems, comments are below. Feel free to add to that, and again, I would have my eternal gratitude. And if, of course, this is your first time visiting, and you decide that Rob guy knows what he's talking about, feel free to like and subscribe. I, always look forward to meeting new people and having people tag along for the ride. And if you know somebody else who's kind of doesn't really know what systems do for a game, feel free to link this to them and share it, and maybe all have that talk together. But until the next time, and there's still a few videos left in this series, plus many videos that I made in the past, I hope to see you again. Thank you and farewell.